Hello and welcome to another What Sold video. You can see my supervisor is making sure that I am doing what I need to do to make sure she still keeps her kibble and her cat litter. But I'm going to share with you everything that sold from February 1st to February 7th, and we're just going to go ahead and get into it. It's all eBay sales because eBay is the main bay and the only bay that is performing for me this week. There you go. You can sit right there. And we're going to start off with a good sale. This is a Y2K St. John Resort piece. This was like an open chunky knit, kind of like a beach cover-up or something to wear over, you know, your bathing suit while you're out on your boat, because St. John, not to be confused with St. John's Bay. St. John is a more mature designer brand, and it sold for $39.87. I paid $4 for this. Surprise to me, I found this at the Dav in Gloucester, which still blows my mind that I found vintage designer in Gloucester. I grew up in Gloucester, so this shocks me. This is a set of 3 D.H. Lawrence books. They sold for $15. I paid 10 cents each for them. I'm so glad that the sale came through because I had multiple messages being like, I'll give you like $6 for one book. Or I'll give you like $7 for these 2 books. I had multiple messages like that. I'm like, no. and then it just sold, and then I didn't have to deal with it. So whoever bought this, thank you, because I got multiple message. D.H. Lawrence is considered a classic writer. A lot of his books are considered classic literature. So I knew picking these up, they would go. I do look out for D.H. Lawrence books whenever I'm out in the wild, and I make these little lots and then I sell them. This is a book I will always be on the lookout for. This actually particular book, this is by C.S. Lewis. It is Surprised by Joy, The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis. I know most people know C.S. Lewis from the Chronicles of Narnia. He also has an absolutely amazing science fiction trilogy that I recommend and do not understand why it is not more popular than the Chronicles of Narnia, other than the fact that the Chronicles of Narnia are written for children and the SF trilogy is an adult set. But if you're someone who likes science fiction, I highly recommend Finding Out of the Silent Planet. That's the first book in C.S. Lewis's space trilogy, and reading that. I'm about ready to do a review on my book channel, that's why I'm like, that is in my brain. But this is one of his other works. He actually has a bunch of treatises as well. He was very into his faith, he was Christian, and he has a lot of dialogues and essays and writings about that, about his faith and about letting God into his life and how he has put it into his works. So if you are religious, again, C.S. Lewis might be a good writer for you. Sold for $19.87. I will look out for this book more often. I paid 50 cents for this at the bins. This is a pair of Silver Tab baggy jeans. I will pick up Silver Tab jeans whenever I find them. These sold for $35. Silver Tab has been revived. It was briefly revived, I believe, in 2018. They did a little limited run, but now with the 90s and the Y2K style being back in fashion, they have brought them back again. So you will have to double check to see if it is modern Silver Tab or if it's vintage Silver Tab. But this is vintage Silver Tab, and they sold for $35. I paid, I believe, $8 for these at the Dav. This is another book I picked up from that big book lot. It sold, I bought it for 10 cents. It sold for $13.38. It was in new condition. I would not pick this up unless I found a bunch of Juan Gisolo. I'm probably messing up their name. I did actually find a whole bunch of this. I could have made a lot, but I just sold them individually because they were new. Was a book I offered up on Whatnot. Nobody bought it, so I sold it here for $14.87. It was a new Shadow March book by Tad Williams. Tad Williams has several series that are very popular. He is a well-known fantasy writer, and yeah, this sold for $14.87. It was like a very thick boy trade paperback. This was a vintage 70s piece. I picked this up at that big vintage buyout, so I have a quarter into this, and it sold for $14. I honestly thought that this would sell for more, but it was a tiny size. So I was perfectly happy, especially at a quarter, to just let it go when I received an offer. Janelle, I think, is a viewer, so thank you, Janelle, if you are indeed a viewer, or thank you even if you're not a viewer and you have no idea I'm thanking you. But they bought 2 pieces from me, this LL Bean linen, which I spelled that wrong, so hooray. This linen cotton blend short sleeve and this Soma large sports bra. I actually offer both of these up on Whatnot because I picked them up at the bins, and she bought each piece for $8, so this was a great sale. So Janelle, again, if you're watching, thank you very much. I appreciate you buying from me, and this was awesome. I actually bought a big lot of ties where I paid $1.50 per tie, and it was a bunch of vintage ties. They were all vintage. Some were dead stock, some were not dead stock. It was a variety of decades from like the 40s to the 90s, and I'm slowly listing them. And this was pretty much anytime I've listed a Polo Ralph Lauren 90s tie, it has immediately sold. So I guess if you're out there in the wild and you find some vintage 90s Polo Ralph Lauren ties, pick them up if you can get them for $3 or less, because they will sell. This sold for $10.87 and the buyer paid for shipping. I like doing that because, as I mentioned, ties, when I've listed them, they take up this much space. So they take up the size of a fist, and you can't mess them up. They're super lightweight and they take up no space in your inventory. So love them. Another book I picked up at the bins. This was an antique, Dick Prescott's 4th Year at West Point. This is actually a series. This is from 1911. There is a series of these books. I believe there are 4 or 5 books that he wrote about his time at West Point. The original ones are antique books. There was a 1950s reprint of these as well, but I will pick these up when I find them out. Singles, sets, they will sell eventually. This is another piece I offered up on Whatnot. It sold for $12.64. It's Long Tall Sally. Long Tall Sally specializes in tall ladies wear, which, as a tall girl, I've talked about, I will pick up all tall things I see. So I got excited when I saw this. It was actually too big for me, or I would have kept it, but it did sell for $12.64. And yeah, happy that a tall lady got a well-fitting garment for themselves. This is another thank you to Rob. Rob bought this vintage West clock for me. I rarely buy electronics because I have several sitting in my death pile. Several absolutely gorgeous vintage blenders that work, that have their original glass. I just need to clean them. It just sit in my death pile because I don't want to deal with them. I also have some beautiful like mid-century modern desk lamps. They just sit. I have a Regency just sitting in my, I just don't list them because I don't like dealing with them. It's not that I would be fine shipping them. It's just the like prepping them to get them listed. I don't know, I just have this mental block. So I don't pick them up often because I know I'm gonna be a bad and not do the thing to get them sold. So I did do this one because I was like, I'm forcing myself to list this box of stuff. And Rob bought this from me. So Rob, thank you. It sold for $12.64. I actually paid for this $2 at an estate sale. So I appreciate you, Rob. Okay, so I bought this at an estate sale, not the same vintage buyout estate sale, but at an estate sale where a bunch of vintage 70s pieces and some handmade 60s dresses. This sold for $12. I paid $2 for this at that estate sale. I actually marketed it as a women's piece because I knew it would sell better that way. It actually had no brand and it had no size in it. So I took measurements. You can see I modeled it on the lovely Karen, which is the name of my mannequin if you did not know. My dress form, because it's not technically a mannequin. A mannequin is like a full body versus that's a dress form. You don't need to know that. Anyway, I sold it as a women's. It actually came from the gentleman of the house closet, but no one's gonna know. This is another book I picked up at the bins. These complete William Shakespeare editions I will pick up. Doesn't really matter who makes them. I will pick up complete William Shakespeare editions whenever I find them. It depends on the condition though. This was in great condition. Sold for $10.94. Again, I paid 50 cents for this. This is ModCloth piece I picked up at the Goodwill for Thriftmas over in Williamsburg. This, I believe they charged me skirt prices for this, despite it being in the dress section. This is one of the jumpers. This is like one of the best sellers that ModCloth has. I do believe this exact thing is still on ModCloth's website. It is one of their like all the time pieces. Sold for $24.87. Super happy with that. I did pay like $5 and some change for it. Another piece I picked up from the bins and put it up on Whatnot. It did not sell there, but it did sell on eBay for $11.15. I bought this because I liked the pattern of it. It was just an interesting, when it was an interesting style shirt, it was an interesting pattern, and it also was new with tags. The brand is not that great, but I figured between all of those, checking all of those other boxes off, it would sell, and it did sell for $11.15, so happy with that. Joseph Roth is another author that I will pick up and lot together unless I get them in new condition. If I get them in new condition or if I get the hardcovers, I will list those separately. But Joseph Roth not only was a novelist, he was also a nonfiction writer as well. I've seen a couple of his collections about his time in Germany and his travels as well. This was 3 of his novellas into one volume, one very thin volume. Sold for $15.90, and I paid 10 cents for this at that big book buyout. Another piece I put up on Whatnot, got it at the bins. It was Liz Sport. I will pick up vintage Liz Claiborne because of the fact that they do, again, sell for me, especially these vintage knit tops. It only sold for $10 on eBay, but again, I got it at the bins. Perfectly happy to save these vintage knitwear pieces from the landfill. This is a piece I got so excited when I found this. I found this specific top, and I also found one in a darker blue, and they're AFCO, and AFCO has a tendency to sell really well, and these were vintage AFCO from the 90s, and they were reverse print patterned pieces. So I marked them up really high, and they did not sell. They sat forever, and it wasn't until I marked them down to around the $20, $25 range that they start to sell on offers. I only paid $5 for this, so I'm not mad at it. It sold for $16. But it was one of those things where people were like, you should mark them up, and I did, and it didn't work. So this is some retail arbitrage. Again, I've talked about that I don't really do retail arbitrage because I don't like doing it. It has a tendency not to work out the way I hope it's going to for me, and the margins aren't as great most of the time. So I only do it around September, October in order to put new with tag stuff into my stores for Q4. And this is one of the pieces that I did that with, but that's also because I really love Animal Crossing. I still play it almost every day. And this is a piece I picked up at a big box store. I did a buyout for it. My buy cost for this was $6, and it sold for $11.87, and then the buyer paid for shipping. It was just a little leaf plush. This is a pair of PacSun jeans. They are a small size, a size 24, but I talked about before how I have really good luck buying and selling black denim. And this was the faded denim mom high-rise jean, and I thought that was interesting because it was like, I don't know, it was kind of color blocked. It had like darker up top, and then it had like this faded section in the middle, and then it was darker down at the bottom. And these were also half off at the Goodwill I picked them up at, so I only paid $4.50 for these. So to sell them for $14, I was perfectly happy with that. I probably would not have picked these up if they were the full $9 that it costs to buy jeans at Goodwill, but for half off I was willing to give them a try, especially because they were also PacSun, and I do like picking up the like Zoomies brands, the PacSun brands, the Boardwalk brands. I like picking those up because they do sell for me. This I wish I could find all the time, especially for the price I did. I actually found this at Diversity for $1 during their power hour. This is a SmartWool women's small merino 150 wool blend base layer. It's a quarter zip. Again, $1. I paid $1 for this. It sold. It did take about 2 months to sell, which is not normal for SmartWool. It does normally sell a lot faster, but it was my first time finding SmartWool. And I found it for $1. And like I said, it's always packed on during power hour at Diversity. And I have found some absolutely stunning pieces there. I love it. I really, if I lived in Richmond, my death pile would be worse because I would literally just do Diversity power hour. I wouldn't even bother going to the bins. I would just do Diversity power hour. It's so good. It's so good. $44.87 is what I sold it for, my full asking price. Amazing. If you did not know, older children's books can sell very well, especially vintage ones from like the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. If they are in good shape, and by good shape I mean like immaculate, as in like the kids haven't chewed on them, they haven't colored in them, they haven't written their names in it, they haven't ripped pages out of them, like that's why they're valuable, is because most of the time any and all of those things have happened to them. So this is from 1957. It is a Mother Goose nursery rhyme book. I bought it for 50 cents at the bins, and it sold for $9.87. And this actually had shipping on it, so they paid, you know, $13. Actually, that's funny. $4.13 is shipping, and that works out perfectly. So they paid $14 for this book, pretty much. And I paid 50 cents for that at the bins. This didn't have anything other than some edge wear, but otherwise it was in immaculate condition. This is a piece I picked up at the bins, I believe. It was a vintage disco shirt. It was a dark floral. I love picking up dark florals. They do amazing. This had the nice long spear point collar. Like, it's had like the spear point collar. Like, it was like both tips touched the shoulders. It was very exaggerated. And I thought this was absolutely stunning. It didn't have a size in it. It didn't have a brand in it, but I knew I could sell it because I sell a lot of vintage clothing. As long as you put like floral disco shirt on it, dark floral disco shirt, somebody's gonna pick it up. I could have also put like spear point collar and that would have done it, but this sold so quick it didn't matter. And it did sell for my full asking price of $24.87. And I paid like maybe 70 cents for this at the bins. So great piece. And then, because I have to do it every time I sell these, I have a box of this stuff. This is contact paper, by the way, if you did not know. I'm not just like waving a stick at you. Better like my stuff. I bought a whole box of this stuff in different patterns at the Restore for $2 a roll. And I thought I was gonna make so much money off of this because my algorithm was feeding me a bunch of like renter-friendly hacks for your apartment, despite the fact I live in my own house. I don't rent this house, I have a mortgage. I don't know why it kept feeding me this stuff, but like talking about, oh, you should buy contact paper and then you can like do your walls and just tear it off and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I thought I was gonna make so much money off of these. I have actually at this point now made the money I thought I was gonna make pretty much right after I bought this stuff and listed it. But it took years. It literally took almost 2 years to sell my first roll. And then now they have consistently sold for me. It's like whenever you have a multi-quantity, multi-variation listing, it seems like it takes forever to get that first bite. But once you get that first bite, it just keeps happening. It's like nobody wants to be the first one to buy the thing to mess up the display. But once it's messed up, everybody's ready to grab a piece of it for themselves. I don't know, it's weird. It's like nobody wants to be the first one and nobody wants to be the last one. Humans are funny. But yeah, so I have basically $6 into this, and they bought, do I have any more of this pattern still? I do. So I have $6, so 3 rolls of these, and they bought them for $29.61 and paid $6 in shipping. It did not cost $6 in shipping to ship them. It cost more than that, just to be transparent, because of the fact that I don't want these to get crushed, because people are using this as like wallpaper. So I box them very safely so they don't get crushed, so that way it will roll out smoothly. So I could have cheaped out on the packaging and then they would have been unhappy. But again, $6 into it, you know, maybe an extra $3 to ship it, still made like 15 bucks. And I still have so much more to sell. I think, so this is the only one really that no one's bought, and it's the green one, and it's the one I've picked out because I liked this one the best. So, you know, if the boy and I ever are able to buy a house together and cohabitate, maybe I'll just use it at like a DIY project or something at some point. But at this point, I've made money off of this that it doesn't owe me anything anymore. I could literally just yeet all this back to the Restore and be perfectly happy with it, but it did take a while. So if you're willing to sit, if you find a bunch of like cool pattern contact paper and it's really cheap and you want to give it a try, go for it. Just be wary that it might take a while to sell and you might regret that decision at some point. I don't now, but like for 2 years I was until they started selling. But you know, that's the funny thing about reselling. Sometimes it's like an immediate sale and you're like, oh my God, did I price that too low? And sometimes you sit on it forever and you're like, oh my God, I made a mistake. So yay. I will see you guys hopefully in another video. Until then, bye.